One of the questions I get asked periodically is what do we make of this whole idea of looking at our genealogy and how that matches up with our past lives? So I talk about this kind of from the idea of genetic DNA versus soul DNA. So I'm going to explain this a little bit to help you maybe understand this and flush this out for yourself, because for those of you who want scientific data about where our lives have been, where our souls have been, it's much harder to do that from a soul perspective than it is from a physical perspective. So, as you know, there's been this trend over the last probably 20, maybe 30 years of looking up our DNA and matching up our family and looking back in our heritage and seeing what it is that, the history of our experiences have been. And there's been some linking for ancestral trauma and ancestral wounding, and it's basically been able to help people heal in many ways. And yet, I want to help you understand and flesh out this idea of what happens when you know that you have had past lives in certain parts of the world, but that your physical DNA doesn't necessarily match up with that. So let me go back and talk about when it does match up first. So my last name is Kelly, so I obviously have an Irish heritage. Probably well, many other names are very similar in helping you know immediately that there's an Irish person when you come up with their name. And, I know a little bit about my grandfather's and great grandfather's heritage through the work that my dad did. And this was before any of the biological tests were available, but he kind of did the research through looking through archives and looking through some of the data books that were back, 20, 200, 300, 400 years ago. But here's the deal. So clearly, I have physical DNA heritage in Ireland. Now, I also know that I've had past lives in Ireland as well, and I did a lot of similar work. I did a lot of spiritual work. I did a lot of spiritual leadership work and teaching and modeling and helping others kind of claim their spiritual natures even back then and help them understand that. And how do I know this? Well, I've had past life regression work that has clearly laid out kind of my path for what part of the country I was in, what kinds of sacred sites I'm related to, things like that. But clearly also my DNA matches me back to certain counties within Ireland. And basically my dad discovered that. I've discovered some of that with the different counties. So there are times when our physical DNA matches up with our soul DNA. And I've got friends who have asked this question, how does that work? I know that I've had, past lives in different parts of the world, but they're not necessarily showing up in my physical DNA. Same thing for me, where I actually know that I've had multiple past lives in different parts of the world. And yet, from a current DNA perspective, it doesn't necessarily show that I've had that much biological essence from those different countries. So here's the thing, and I want to kind of keep this as simple as possible because this is a bit of a complex idea that maybe our physiology does not travel along with us. But if you think about this, there's no way that it could every single lifetime. And the reason for that is our soul is the energetic DNA of who we are. And when I say energetic DNA, I think about the idea that if the soul is the energetic essence of who we are, and it's kind of the cloud in the sky, meaning that it is what collects all of the data, all of the information, all of our memories, all of our experiences from many, many, many lifetimes, that doesn't necessarily mean that your physical DNA is going to match up with your spiritual or your soul DNA, because we switch out our different lineages depending on what it is we're supposed to learn. So, for instance, I know I have had past lives in Peru. I know that I've had past lives in Egypt and in other parts of the world. And yet, my physical DNA from this current lifetime does not show up with that. Well, think about this. Our souls may inhabit the experience of the human life that we are living, but it is not necessarily physically attached to a body. So, in other words, if it's the energetic essence of who a person is, and before we come to the earthly experience every time, we make a choice for are we going to be male or female? What kinds of experiences are we going to have? What kind of body is it that we are going to need in order to live that existence in the way that it is supposed to happen for us to learn our lessons and experience what we're supposed to experience for our soul's evolution? And lots of choices are made about our human bodies before we get there. And sometimes we do choose our human lineage in order to continue lessons, or sometimes it is, I would say primarily, it is for the ancestral healing aspect. And specifically right now, there's so many folks that are interested in this concept of ancestral healing. And they have chosen, their souls have chosen to come back in that lineage in order to help heal aspects of that lineage that have had trauma or very tragic or difficult times. So our souls are kind of still in charge with how we choose our DNA, even when we enter into every given lifetime. So think about this. Our soul DNA may not always match our physical DNA because of the fact that we have different lessons to learn. We have different paths to take. We have different storylines that we are here to work through or work with in order to get where we're supposed to go. Now, I'm going to throw this information out there, and I want you to really think about it because it is astounding for me to think about this. But I'm going to explain a few things about this. So, when the pandemic was happening, I read a book that was talking about the 1918 pandemic. And it showed that the estimates at the time were that there were about 1.5 billion people on the planet. So spread around the entire globe, there were about 1.5 billion people. Currently, the estimates is that it's over 8.6 billion people on the planet. So how in the world, and this is what's mind-blowing to me, how in the world, now I'm not talking from a birds and the bees perspective, I know how that part works. Think about how does a planet gain 7 billion more people in just 100 years? How is that possible? Because when you really think about that, that is a lot. So why is that happening? How is that happening? And the most recent pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, was kind of a wake-up call for a lot of people in many, many ways. And we are entering a time right now of growing spiritual awareness. There's going to be in the next several years, and it's starting, well, it already started, but exponentially more and more people are going to be really interested in the spiritual world. And they need explanations like these videos to help them understand the different bits and pieces and the different layers and the different angles and the different elements of how this soul thing works. And the reason why, I think one of the main reasons why we've gained 7 billion more people in 100 years is that this is a time of growing, and I mean exponentially growing human consciousness. This is a time of growing spiritual consciousness and spiritual awareness. And so all of these souls that have chosen to come here are kind of doing what I call a going out of business sale, because this planet cannot sustain that many human beings for that much longer. And again, I'm not going to say that I'm not trying to raise a fuss and raise a panic, but the planet cannot sustain this. And yet the souls that are coming here are coming because they know that this thing that we call Earth School is their best possibility in learning the human aspects, learning the experiences that they're supposed to learn as humans so that they can move on and move forward further. So this is the next thing to think about is, okay, so this is another reason why our soul DNA may not match our human DNA, because basically the souls are trying to get here however they can, and they're kind of creating these ways to get here. In our genealogy, if you think back, there's been probably billions of people on the planet over the years, but they didn't all reincarnate at the same time. Now there are a lot of human bodies that are here and a whole lot of souls that are arriving because they want to experience the human experience. So, there's no way to test soul DNA other than through past life regression theory. And I know a lot of people are going to, balk at the whole idea that, past lives even exist or that they're real. But I can guarantee you, anybody who has had a past life experience knows that they're real. They know that it is a form of a memory that is coming back to them because healing can take place almost immediately. Memories can bring things together and help people connect dots and help them understand their soul path and how this all works. And so, I just want to flush this whole idea out that, your human DNA is not always going to match your soul DNA, but it often does. I have a friend who's had lives in Scotland, and I was in Ireland at the time that she had the lives in Scotland. And so we figured out a little bit how this all worked for us in knowing each other. And it's the same thing where she's discovering that her soul DNA, in this case, does match her Scotland DNA. But on the other hand, some of her other past lives don't match, where she's been in her soul space before. So another idea to think about before I end is that sometimes, we talk about the idea that we actually can live multiple lives at the same time, and that time folds over on itself. And so there are theories out there that say that because time kind of folds over on itself, that we are living different forms of DNA. That's another possibility. I don't know how we'd prove that. But the thing is, if you are one of those people that's digging into your physical DNA and you're not finding anything that matches up with your past lives, don't fret because that probably means you had a different set of physical DNA for those lifetimes and that you're playing out a different storyline right now. So I'm guessing that this is throwing even more questions, but the good thing with this is we are not going to answer these questions unless we ask them. So if you have questions about this and want to flush this out, feel free to email me, feel free to make a comment, but also just start thinking about how this might match up for you or how this might not match up, but what the possibilities are. Because this is another part of our soul's growth and soul's evolution is that we can't expect that this human DNA is the only aspect of our history. So think about it. If you have questions, let me know. It's just something I wanted to flush out because I'm getting these questions and I'm getting, I've had conversations with friends about this, but I'm getting kind of more conversations about, wow, how does this soul thing work? And I just wanted to give you a little bit more information about that. So again, I'd love to hear your comment. Have a wonderful day and go ponder your DNA, both your physical and your soul DNA. Bye-bye.